Welcome everyone, this is Tactical Lich here, and today we are on the fields of Total Warhammer 3 online multiplayer after that 1.2 patch dropped. The patch introduced some changes to different units, including multiple Regiment of Renowns, stat changes to regular units, but personally, one of my favorite changes is to Plaguefather. Now, this legendary lord on the toilet seat did not receive any stat changes, but instead, one ability addition. The Mortis Engine effect made him really powerful, an absolute menace on the battlefield. We'll talk about this legendary Great Unclean One's capabilities in a bit more detail during the battle, but now let's look at the rest of the army build for both players on the field. For the Nurgle played by yours truly, we have a front line of Nurglings, providing a bit buffering infantry and backed up by a couple Forsakens of Nurgle. Accompanying Kugav, we have two Soul Grinders of Nurgle readying to lay waste on their enemies with their deadly mortar fire, alongside Kugav's own explosive Nurglings. And this is the theme of this build, triple artillery with Kugav being the core, providing a lot of healing and also damaging spell casting abilities, ability support. This one's neglected Nurgle legendary lord is now a powerful component of this army. In the skies, we have a couple Furies to provide additional mobility, and a couple Plague Toads on the flanks. As for our opponent here, World Beater 68, we have a front line of Jade Warriors backed up by Celestial Dragon Gods, one of them the Regiment of Renown version Dune Dragons, with that spell resistance and also magic attacks to deal with the demons better and also resist that spell damage, including the very devastating Stream of Corruption spell from Nurgle. In the back, our opponent is bringing the newly buffed Crane Gunners from the Cathay roster. They receive some significant buffs, including the ability to penetrate infantry models, but of course that comes with a massive cost increase and making them somewhat on par with the Skaven Jezzails. Protecting them are a lot of Peasant Long Spears, forming quite a bit of a box, preventing any flanking maneuvers. Behind the Cathay lines, a couple Jade Lancers are ready to countercharge any Nurgle mobility. Basically a box build trying to pressure with the Crane Gunners and hold the line with the Celestial Dragon Gods. In the skies, we have a classic Shogun Lord with the Lore of Nurgle coming in with the Talons of the Night as well as Ancestral Warrior Summon as her spell kit. And that's basically for army builds. Let's get the battle started and witness the rise of the Plaguefather. When you're playing against Nurgle, you wouldn't typically consider them as an artillery faction, and my opponent here is totally unprepared to be outranged by Nurgle. Spending a lot of funds on elite infantry, he does not have the funds for any Grand Cannon of Cathay. So he was forced to push up with the inferior range on these Crane Gunners, only 275 against my 360 range on the Soul Grinders. They were forced to push up ahead, suffering massive losses from the devastating firepower from my explosive Nurglings from Kugav and then the Plague Mortars from the Soul Grinders. You can see that the Celestial Dragon Guards are being bled dry by all those artillery bombardments, one of them already down to half health before the Crane Gunners are in firing position. Cathay needs to shut down the Nurgle firepower. So my opponent here very cleverly pushed up the Shogun Lord as I do not have any aerial forces that can contest with her, and then dropped in an Ancestral Warrior Summon into the middle of my formation, causing some confusion in the backline here with the anti-large armor piercing as well as magical attacks, threatening my backline, threatening the artillery, and forcing my Soul Grinders and Kugav to fall back away from the Ancestral Warriors. Of course, it is only a summon, so I don't really need to deal with it right now. I just basically pulled back my units and ran away until it disappeared. But that basically silenced my artillery for a while, allowing these Crane Gunners to push up and start shooting at my Soul Grinders again. I will be forced to respond with the Chaos Furies, and this moment shows that why Crane Gunners are much worse than Warlock Jezzails even after the update. For Warlock Jezzails, you have 70 armor on the weapons teams, but on Crane Gunners, there's only 30 armor. And with a single charge from these two Fury units, the Crane Gunners got absolutely devastated before the Celestial Dragon Guard tattered from all the missile fire, can even get into range and support. Routing one Crane Gunner unit, I will be quickly pulling back the Chaos Furies and rear charge these extremely battered Jade Warriors who are facing a charge from the Forsaken and a rear charge from these Chaos Furies, quickly routing them and moving on to the second unit of Crane Gunners who do not have a lot of mobility protection right now, only Celestial Dragon Gods moving in. The Crane Gunners with their paper thin armor are routed from a battle where the Giselle teams could have survived with their thicker armor. In the earlier stage of the battle, they have put up a great fight counter-firing my artillery, who has taken some noticeable damage from their sharp shooting, but that is nothing the Nurgle can't heal with a spell or two, as they continue to fire from the back of the battlefield. And with that, my opponent loses both crane gunners and the ability to kill off my soul grinders and artillery units from afar, while my artillery, the soul grinder bombardments are still going on. The Dune Dragons are already down to 39 models, less than 1/4 of their HP, while my infantry are pushing ahead, just basically tying down all these Jade Warriors, as Kugath is slowly waddling forward on his toilet seat, moving up to get in range to cast that Fleshy Abundance onto the Demon Machine. And on this flank, with all these blobbed up long spears, Jade Warriors, Jade Lances, my surviving artillery are still continuing their bombardment, doing some really nice damage, while the Furies will be chasing off routing units. On this flank, we have the Shogun Gunlord diving down, hoping to snipe out my Soul Grinder. And with my Plague Toads being tied down by a bunch of Jade Lances, she actually managed to create an opportunity to do so, with the Ancestral Warrior summoned into the field, surrounding that Soul Grinder with those armor-piercing magical attacks, ignoring that physical resistance. Even with the Fecundity heals, this would not be enough to sustain the Soul Grinder's HP. I'll be pulling in one of the Soul Grinder unit as well, hoping to get some decent rear charges, armor-piercing damage into the Dragonblood, the Shogun Gunlord, but the Soul Grinder over here is down to half health and the leadership is not holding up whatsoever. A Stream of Corruption is dropped, hoping to whittle down the Ancestral Warriors, but not quite enough, while I will be sending in some invested Nurgling summons, hoping to pin in the Ancestral Warriors and at least cover the retreat of one of these Soul Grinders, as I am losing this one Soul Grinder for sure, crumbling down to minus 55 leadership. He is not coming back whatsoever. I'll be pushing him up ahead, hoping to expend some last bit of his ammo before he goes down, as I still have a couple really tattered Forsaken units and Nurglings fighting in the front line, hoping to delay the push of this blobbed up Cathay infantry horde. But alas, either the line of sight is blocked or the reloading animation isn't complete just yet, and the Soul Grinder never fired another shot until it faded from the material realm, with the loss of one Soul Grinder. Over here, we will be recuperating with my artillery pieces, the Soul Grinder and Kugath, getting 60 kills, pretty nice, and the Soul Grinder over 100 kills already, a Chevron almost 2, and they will be continuously unloading into the formations of the Cathay army, but unfortunately some trees block the shots there. Still, they have done some impressive damage and are extremely healthy right now, putting the balance of power ever so slightly in my favor due to the extremely healthy single entities, while Kugath will be continuously firing due to the abundance of his ammo, just blasting away some of these Jade Lances with that armor-piercing poison shots. The Shogun Gunlord dived in for a sneaky rear charge, but not quite doing the damage it needs to take down the Soul Grinder, while Kugath is just continuously blasting away at the Jade Lances, putting them down to routing territory in terms of leadership, while the rest of the infantry of Cathay are just reorganizing formations, hoping to push up and tie down the Soul Grinder. But this is where the update of Kugath shines. The Mortis engine, in fact, really comes into play here, as before, Kugath did not have that Mortis engine, in fact, and once he got tied down in melee by those multi-entity units, he doesn't really have the best of performance despite his massive size, the splash attacks and whatnot, because his killing power lies in that firepower, and without that firepower, his damage output is basically locked down. But now, even as he engaged in melee combat, he still has that kind of health draining effect, just like the other Great Unclean ones, and that puts him on par, or even better than regular Great Unclean ones, due to that infested Nurgling summon, providing extra bodies, extra infantry support, buffering him from attacks while keeping him safe to continuously dish out the damage, dropping in the Virulent Contagion for that melee defense debuff as well, lowering the protection from all these Jade Warriors and Long Spear units. allowing more effective attacks from these single entity units and even the infested Nurglings. And with that, all these infantry support for Cathay, even the Dune Dragons, the most elite of Celestial Dragon Guards, are pulled away from battle, shattered in combat, leaving only some Jade Warriors battered, exhausted in combat, and also some really puny Peasant Long Spears, putting the balance of power quite in favor of the Nurgle now, since my single entities are extremely healthy, upholding that balance of power. Now let us fast forward here as the grind continues. There are some Crane Gunners returning from routing, a bit wavering, but they will continue to shoot at my single entities, and they still have quite a few unit models left, dishing out some decent noticeable damage, so I'll be responding soon with some artillery shots, blasting away, not really trying to do the damage here, but using the artillery damage in morale to rout them off early, instead of dealing with all these shots and tanking it. And also a stream of corruption was dropped into the blob earlier, devastating a bunch of Peasant Long Spears who try to blob up around the single entities. This is inevitable in the late game when all you have is infantry and your enemies have only single entities. And at this point, there is quite little hope for my opponent to pull back this game, as I dropped in another invested Nurgling summon, and Kugav continuously draining the health of all these surrounding units, including the last bit of the Celestial Dragon Gods, routing them with Terror effect. The Shugen Gunlord drops in, hoping to go for one last hurrah, doing some sneaky rear charging, but the infested Nurglings are here to support. The Soul Grinder as well, just smashing apart some poor Peasant Long Spears. The Shugen Gunlord drops in again. The Crane Gunners are still shooting, but not for long as they rout from combat. So does the rest of the Cathay army. And that's it for the main battle replay. Now let's talk about Kugath as an updated legendary lord and this powerful triple artillery build of Nurgle. Contrary to the faction's design, Nurgle actually has one of the strongest firepower in the game. You can see that with one hit from the Plague Mortars of the Soul Grinders, they managed to knock off the shields on these blue horrors. Between the high damage from the Plague Mortar bombardments, the tankiness from the physical resistance, high HP pool, and the healing from the Lore of Nurgle, Papa Nurgle's army can field some devastating firepower, who is also extremely survivable in any scenarios. Honestly, I got this idea from a player from one of the multiplayer Discord who mentioned that a triple artillery from the Nurgle army can challenge even the Cathay to an artillery duel. A typical game would start with the artillery shooting, and the approaching enemy will be intercepted by all the infantry, the Nurglings, and the Forsaken, happily sacrificing their lives in the name of Nurgle to buy time for the artillery to shoot. If there are any tough nuts that the Nurglings and Forsaken can't deal with, Kugath always have that mid-range option of Stream of Corruption, providing massive armor-piercing damage, able to devastate the ranks of their foes. Even if they get tied down in melee, worry not, because artillery models in the Nurgle rosters are extremely powerful even as a melee unit. On top of that, for Kugath, the infested Nurgling summon just synergizes with him so well right now. First off, the Nurglings can charge forth to tie down any mobile threats, just like these Furies. Secondly, these Nurglings can act as meat shields, surrounding Kugath, absorbing hits from nearby melee units, allowing Kugath to stay in the middle of combat, activating his Mortis Engine ability, the Pestilent Decay. Kugath now is just a really versatile character, with tools dealing with all kinds of combat scenarios. For ranged battles, you have the default artillery attacks. For mid-range to close range, there is the Stream of Corruption, able to devastate any armored formations. And then for close quarters combat, the Pestilent Decay and Infested Nurgling summons are extremely useful, combined with his own armor-piercing, poisonous melee attacks. Still, there is one problem remaining, which is single entity goon squads attempting to snipe him out, combining with a large force of mobility, capable of silencing all the Soul Grinders as well. And this is why you need to bring sufficient forces of mobility, preferably the Plague Toads, who are cheap enough to be sacrificed like this, tying down a bunch of Kislev single entities, pinning down enemy units with their lives so that the artillery can continuously fire into enemy blobs, expending their ammo before being forced into melee combat, maximizing their damage value and eliminating enemy infantry support. Normally, I would try to kill off every multi-entity unit in my opponent's army before engaging the single-entity goon squad, as by that time of battle I'll still have some infantry support on my end, able to isolate the units into a solid melee grind. My soul grinders will be able to cycle charge and snipe out enemy single entities, and receive plenty of healing from the Nurgle army ability and spells. Another weakness of this build is that it probably won't work against the Ogre Kingdoms, as their large entities with high HP in each model won't receive that much damage from the anti-infantry mortars. And then there are the Iron Blaster's cannon with massive DPS, with no artillery crew. That means the Plague Mortars have no effective way to damage it. Now let us quickly wrap up this battle with the army performances. For the Nurgle army, the infantry didn't really do too much damage. They mostly were there to delay the advance of the Kislev formations, and then maybe clean up some of the infantry with the high damage power of the Forsaken. Mostly, the damage dealers are on the Soul Grinders and Kugath Plaguefather, who earn over 2,600 gold worth of damage between the Stream of Corruption, the explosive Nurglings he tossed into enemy lines, as well as his close quarters combat strength from the Mortis Engine effect, and also his armor-piercing melee attacks. Almost 300 kills, and still his health mostly intact. Kugath Plaguefather is definitely a menace on the battlefield after the update. As for the double soul grinders, one of them got some juicy kills, including 3 chevrons, over 170 kills, over 2,400 damage value, surviving till the end, backstabbing the Shogun Lord, and also wreaking havoc among the ranks of enemy infantry. Unfortunately, the other Soul Grinder got sniped out by an isolation of the Ancestral Warrior summon and the Shogun Lord, and got eliminated early, limiting his performances, but still, overall this trio of bombardment was just devastating to the Kislev formations, especially how much focus they have on infantry units. Now for the mobility, the Chaos Furies actually earned back quite a bit of their own value, managing to eliminate both Crane Gunners in the early game and also recharging some Jade Warriors to death. While the Plague Toads of Nurgle, they didn't manage to do too much damage, mostly there to delay the advance of Jade Lancers, using their physical resistance and meaty health pool to basically hold down enemy units. As for the Kislev army, the Crane Gunners didn't really do too well here, as they have limited performances being shut down early by the Chaos Furies, and the infantry here, the Jade Warriors, they did not have a lot of damage output. Same goes for the Peasant Long Spears, so they didn't really quite earn back their own value. While the Celestial Dragon Gods suffered heavily at the hands of the Triple Plague Artillery, being obliterated before they can even engage into combat. Even the Dune Dragons failed to earn back most of their value. Really, one thing you don't want to do when you're playing against Nurgle is to bring elite infantry, due to how effective they can kill all these high value units. Stream of Corruption, the Plague Mortars, and even the Mortis Engine effect of Kugath or the Great Unclean Ones can easily drag down these tough warriors in a great hurry, regardless of their armor, leadership, or melee stats. And lastly, for the Dragon-Blooded Shogun Lord, less than 1,000 damage value due to the fact that she was only able to rear charge one single Soul Grinder, and at the same time she got rear charged by the other Soul Grinder, suffering massive armor-piercing damage in close quarters combat, and was not able to carry the game with only a couple Ancestral Warrior summons, while the Talents of the Night was not exactly effective here due to the lack of big infantry blobs. And yeah, that's basically it for today's battle. I hope you enjoyed this video and find the build of Triple Plague Artillery, especially with the updated Kugath Plaguefather here, a fun build to play with and watch. Be sure to hit the like and subscribe to keep an eye out on my future content. They will be including battle replays, army build videos like this one, tips and strategies for Total Warhammer multiplayer, And also, occasionally, memes and shitpost videos. And if you have any battle replays that you want to showcase, feel free to drop by my Discord or send me an email with the replay file attached. I'll be sure to check them out. And yeah, that's basically it for today's battle. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Tactical Lich, signing out.